doesn't matter whether you like Donald Trump or not. That is an insignificant conversation. It doesn't matter. When it comes to whether or not he can be on the ballot in places like Michigan or in other places, well, now we're talking about the law. Now we're talking about the Constitution. Now we're talking about whether or not these people making this claim that Trump is an insurrectionist and according to the 14th Amendment, he's not allowed on the ballot, whether or not that should stand. This is a conversation about where those forces against Trump have lost and losing on the constitutional merits, and people wanting to decide an election before you get a chance to do so. William Jacobson, Cornell law professor. He is the mind behind legalinsurrection.com. And right here, Bloomberg with the headline, Trump wins Michigan ruling to remain on the primary ballot. Now, all of this has to do with challenges being made across the country regarding the 14th Amendment, specifically Section 3. I need to read it to you, sir, but I'll read it because some people may not know it. That no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as any member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof, but Congress may by a vote of 2/3 of each house remove such disability. Now, to me, that says that Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib can't be members of Congress because they've given aid and comfort to Hamas. The Trump hater wants to say that it is because of January 6th that Trump is precluded from being on the ballot. Michigan, the court said no. Other states have said no. Am I making the proper argument that they're trying to make against Trump? And what have these rulings said?
Well, the ruling, there was one in Minnesota, which is a little narrower than the one in that just came down in Michigan. The one in Minnesota was simply that it's premature, that there's this Article 3 and the power of the state election official to remove someone from a ballot does not in any way, shape, or form relate to a primary ballot. Okay, and so the court in Minnesota said, hey, you can come back later for the general election, but none of what you're saying applies to a primary, because a primary is essentially just the internal operating rules of a party to nominate somebody. It's not actually putting a name on the ballot. Michigan went further, and I think is probably correct in going further, and which I think also may be why we're never going to get a definitive answer. Michigan said, yes, it's premature. This is just the primary ballot. But the judge there went further and said that it's a non-justiciable, hard to pronounce, term, meaning it's not something for the judiciary to decide, that it's a political question, and that the judiciary should not be deciding political questions. That ruling, if it holds up, when they come back for the general election challenge, really gets rid of the case, because it says you're in the wrong place. This is not for the courts to decide. This is a political issue. Now, how that plays out in real life, we tend to think that there's always an answer to things under the Constitution that a judge should decide. And I think what that judge says is that, no, this is a political question. Maybe it's for Congress to deal with. Maybe it's for the voters to deal with. If you think somebody committed an insurrection, don't vote for them. Judge didn't say that, but I mean, that's how you would resolve it politically. And so we don't have a definitive answer in Michigan because the judge there did say it's premature. We can certainly expect Democrats to be back once Trump is nominated, because this would have to occur very late in the process. This would have to occur after he is the official nominee of the Republican Party. So that would be after the convention, and a request is made to have his name be on the general election ballot. So this is something that we're probably going to be dealing with in June or July, probably July.
What I think is interesting is that they're asking the judge to say what Congress did not say regarding removal. There was there was no moving forward on impeachment after the second impeachment. There was no removal from office. The charge of insurrection is made by a political party, but has not been ever adjudicated anywhere. Is there a judge out there who desperately wants to get on the record and say, oh, yes, I've decided because this group of people feel a certain way, this is now a ruling?
Well, I'm sure if they bring enough of these cases, they're going to find a judge. Okay. And so the question is, how is the federal judiciary and the U.S. Supreme Court ultimately going to rule? And they haven't had luck finding a judge yet. I mean, this is obviously a monumental decision to keep somebody off a ballot, for reasons not having to do with other qualifications, your age, your citizenship, things like that. Did you file the right number of signatures? And those are things that are not controversial to keep somebody off a ballot. But, I think they're going to have trouble finding somebody. I'm not saying they won't find somebody who's going to want to make this decision. And you're right. Congress during the impeachment could have convicted Trump and he wouldn't have been able to run for office again. Congress chose not to. So that's what I mean when that was an opportunity. So I think that this is going to linger. Courts are going to keep saying primary ballot is not something we have to deal with now. Come back to us after he's the nominee. So we're going to see these fights play out in July and August, and then the stakes will even be higher. Presuming he is the nominee, you're going to be asking a judge to rule that the Republican Party has no nominee for their ballot. Which is worse than now. The primary, they can nominate somebody else.
But I mean, so much of this, whether I'm a Trump guy or not a Trump guy, I've said this before. If Trump's the nominee, I'll vote for him. But I think I have a couple directions I want to go in before that's the case. But this is so much a conversation as we're watching, as you and I have discussed the indictments. There is an election interference conversation to be had here. Has anybody discussed within the judicial world that what we're seeing from Fani Willis in Atlanta, what we're seeing from Letitia James in New York, what we've seen from Jack Smith, the special counsel, this is not the way justice was intended to portray itself?
Well, this is a point I've made. I know you've made. A lot of people have made that this should have all been done a year ago. This, whatever they're accusing Trump of being and doing, they could have brought these cases almost 2 years ago. We would have the answer to whether he's going to be a convicted felon, not in the middle of a primary race. And in some cases, this may be after he's the nominee. So this is, to me, absolute election interference. When you're talking about a major political candidate for a major party, someone who, whether you believe the polling now or not, based on the polling, he is significantly in the lead, is the most likely nominee. And you wait until the middle of that cycle to bring these cases. To me, that is election interference. It may not be illegal election interference, but it is election interference.